Flyers win in overtime. It was a roller coaster game. You heard it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Without further ado, we're going to get into it right now. Also, it's a Weinberg Wednesday coming up. Less than 30 minutes from now is Dave Weinberg. We talk some about the Eagles. We got a lot to get to in a short amount of time here on game night. And joining us now to talk about the Flyers is Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN.com Flyers insider, and Flyers coverage on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and they'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sportsbook along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. It felt like, Kevin, the Flyers were gambling with everybody's emotions the way that game went. How are you doing after that overtime win?
Better than I was at the end of regulation, I'll tell you that much.
So let's go through the ebb and flow of that game before we get to the overtime. It felt like the Flyers came out on a mission in that first period, and I don't think it was a coincidence that all three of the goals scored against Varlamov were on the right side of him, and it seemed like that might have been a weak point for him tonight.
Yeah, it definitely was, and that was exactly the first period I was looking for from this team. You needed to make a statement. You needed to set the tone, and you needed your big players and your best players to come out and be the best. And Kevin Hayes comes out. It's a goal 2 minutes into the game. That's the right way to start. He gets another one. And then Sean Couturier with a great individual effort to give you a 3-0 lead. Those are the guys that I was looking to see perform, and that was the type of first period I wanted to see. And they really executed well in that first period. They set the tone for the game, and it set them up and put them in a position to win the game. And obviously it was, as playoff hockey can be, it was a roller coaster ride from there, but they were able to finish the job, luckily for them, because it would be a very different reaction if they didn't finish this game off.
When you look at the difference, though, between what we saw at the beginning of the game and then what happened in the third period, at least in my eyes, it looked like they went from a super focused, aggressive team to a team that, frankly, lost their discipline and got a little out of focus at times.
Yeah, and, during the third period, I thought for probably about 7-8 minutes of the third period, they were doing exactly what you expect them to do. They killed off the rest of a penalty. They were really limiting the opportunities. I think the Islanders had one shot on goal for most of it. And all of a sudden, they continued to sit back. They let the Islanders press a little bit. The Islanders forced them into mistakes, and they made some undisciplined mistakes as well. And it led to opportunities. I mean, honestly, as I'm looking at that game-tying goal by Pajot, it's Travis Sanheim standing behind the net with all sorts of time, and all you have to do is just find a way to get it up and out. I mean, there's not too much to it. And I understand what he was trying to do by making a play along the boards. That's the right call. But you could probably take it out from behind your net a little bit and use that time and space to your advantage and see what opens up, see if there's an opportunity to get out, because there was a battle between two players right there along the blue line, and that can lead to a keep, that can lead to an opportunity. Obviously, by that point, a lot of the rest of the Flyers had broken out, and it left Pajot wide open, and he's not going to miss from that spot. He's that talented, and that's why the Islanders picked him up at the trade deadline. So there's got to be better execution, especially down the stretch. It felt like as that game wore on, the moment that second goal was a big game changer for me too, because for most of it, even as the Islanders started to press, you were getting the performance. It was, time starting to wind down and they need 2 goals. And they get that one with about just under 9 minutes to go. And there was way too much time left for them. They had more than enough life at that point in time, and you knew you had to play a perfect game from there, and they didn't. So that's why the Islanders found a way to tie the game. And good for them to come back out and definitely look like the more energized team when overtime started and more motivated to get the job done, because at that point, as that third period wound down, they were not the team motivated to win the game, and the Islanders nearly could have taken that game before they even had a shot.
Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, Kevin Durso, joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following Kevin on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for your Flyers and NHL playoff coverage. Looking at that game as well, and I'm not trying to be hyper judgmental, but it felt like a couple of the goals, again, another situation where you have a team scoring on Carter Hart, and it just didn't feel like it was all Carter Hart's fault. I thought there were the 2 of the 3 goals against him were situations that the Flyers actually could have avoided, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely the third goal for sure. And the first one's a tough one for him to stop, and that's a power play goal. The second one is a little bit of it's one that you want him to have back for sure. I mean, he absolutely needs to try to come up with a big save there for you. It's a give and go off of a rush. You really need to have something, you need to stop there. And that might have stopped some of the bleeding too. I mean, that's the goal that really gives the Islanders a lift in that third period because they hadn't found a way to solve them yet to that point with the exception of the one power play opportunity. And now they could really see their 5-on-5 game coming to life. And that's where they gain the motivation. But I thought that in the moments following both of those goals, Carter Hart played well, and he did his job from there too, because, I mean, there were a couple different times where the Islanders could have tied that game. They could have ended it. At one point in time, I tweeted, Anders Lee probably could have had 4 goals in this game. He was that good. And he was, I'm not going to lie, he was my pick to end this thing in overtime because I just thought he had the touch. And luckily for the Flyers, and good for them actually, that on his brief opportunities that he had in overtime to see the ice, he didn't get a sniff of the net. And that's credit to them for coming out motivated again, like I said. So that was a good way for them to finish it off, but they need more from everybody so that it doesn't always fall back on whether or not Carter Hart made a save, no matter how good the opportunity is for the Islanders, that it makes it seem like it's impossible for him to stop. You just got to try to prevent those more often and really take away the front of the net for this team, because as soon as they get there, they find a way.
Yeah, I felt that there was at least 2 or 3 other times that it felt like the Flyers just missed some scoring opportunities for the Islanders. If I could just play devil's advocate with you with the power play goal, and this was just my little watching the game, I felt like that tonight, this afternoon, I should say. I keep thinking the game's at night, but it's the afternoon. But the power play goal, you have a guy camping out in front of your goaltender. And I'm watching this game, and I feel like every time the Flyers have someone go near the Islanders goaltender, there's someone pushing him, poking him, nudging him, getting a little physical with the guy near the front of the net. Whereas you have a guy who ends up in front of Carter Hart, and nobody's there to even give him a little, bump or anything.
Yeah, on that particular one where they did score the goal, I mean, I think that part of the problem there is that something happens so quickly. They get set up so quickly there. It takes them only 17 seconds to score, that you're not able to establish your foundation for the penalty kill at that time. It was also it was their first power play of the game too at that point, so it's not an area that both sides have had a lot of work on in the last couple of days. So the space was there. The Islanders took advantage of it, and the Flyers really never had time to get set up. It is something you need to improve though, and I think that's an area not just on the penalty kill, but at 5-on-5 as well, that you need to account for. You need to make sure that your goaltender is protected, that there's not guys getting in the crease around him and getting those opportunities from in close, because both teams are going to thrive off of that one way or the other. If it goes, if the Flyers have guys around the net, they can find a way to score from there too. And obviously the Islanders have proven that they can score when they get guys down there like that. So that's an area you need to clean up, whether it's on the penalty kill or at 5-on-5. I think you just need guys to be even more physical and more, it's a little bit tough when you have a lot of young guys in the lineup that aren't as battle tested in the playoffs. But, I do think that guys like Phil Myers have embraced that part of the game. You just can't have that guy out there all the time. And when you don't, it could end up costing you if the guy who's out there in his place isn't as physical as he is and not clearing the front of the net like he is. So that's probably where you need to clean that area up. You just need to keep guys out of that area because they will take advantage. They're a hungry team when they get in front of the net, and that's really the bottom line with the Islanders.
Speaking of power plays, the Flyers again go for Oper on the power play, 0 for 2 today. What did you see from the power play, and why are they still having trouble scoring?
On the first one, I didn't think it was terrible. They had some good movement, but again, I think they're still looking for perfection. And you can't look for perfection against teams. They couldn't look for it against Montreal, and they can't look for it against the Islanders either. You've got to just try to go hard to the net and find a way to get the puck to the net. That's the real simple approach to it. You just got to be able to do those things. And while the Flyers, I think, had better possession, especially from the top unit on that first power play, especially after they had scored a goal early in the game, I don't think that from there I saw much. The second unit looked terrible on that power play. And then after that, again, you get an early one in the second period, and this is before the Islanders really had a chance to start to play their game. The problem I have with the second one is that it was kind of a gift power play. Here's Ross Johnston, who is known as their big tough guy on that fourth line, and he goes and gets a little bit too aggressive trying to get into it with a couple of guys and gets called for roughing. You have an opportunity there to really put your foot down and really show all the authority in the world on this game. And you didn't take advantage of it, and slowly but surely you saw how the Islanders built off of that penalty kill, where they get some momentum out of that. They get one goal and they get their power play opportunity, and there was a really, really big chance that this game could have turned into a game that was won or lost, depending on which side you're on, with special teams. There was a really big chance of that, and the Flyers are lucky to have survived it in this one. They're going to have to continue to work on things on the power play because they need to get it going. It was good to see some of the guys who are on that power play get some success at 5-on-5, but they really need to get it going on the power play because these opportunities, they had one power play well after the game was decided in game one. They had two today. If it's not obvious by now, they're going to have few opportunities on the power play in this series, more than likely. So you've got to take advantage of the ones you do get because they could change the game.
Flyers win in overtime 4-3 over the Islanders thanks to the goal by Phil Myers. Let's talk about Myers again. I mean, this guy seems to keep coming up with these big goals. And honestly, Kevin, I never really thought of him as a goal-scoring defenseman, but it almost feels like he's turning into that guy.
He's got some offensive prowess, no question about it. I mean, he's not going to light the world on fire with his offensive numbers, but he's got some ability for sure. And for him, I love that he's the type of guy who scores this goal because he's going to get fired up about it. He's a very emotional player, and he's worked really hard to get to where he is. This is as big of a goal as he's scored in his career, obviously, to this point. He's still a young player, but he's worked really hard as an undrafted free agent, having to prove everything at every step of the way of his journey to get to the NHL, and now he's got a playoff overtime goal. And so what a lift for him. I'm sure it's a lift for the rest of the team, too, because they'll feel good that he contributed in that way. And it was awesome to see. Honestly, it was a great way to really put a wrap on the game because it looked like Sean Couturier was going to score moments before that. And it was a really good block in front of the net that prevented it from happening. But I credit Couturier a lot after that because he did stay with the play. And, I talked earlier when I was on the Sports Bash this afternoon before the game that, frustration was starting to set in with some of these guys. And that's a moment where, and I don't know if it's, if Couturier scoring in the first period has anything to do with it, but maybe if you're still not getting anything, that's a moment where you put your head to the sky and let the frustration set in, and maybe the play is over after that. Couturier stayed with it, gets the puck back to the blue line. That's where Myers is waiting. There was a lane there, and you had the Islanders a little bit out of sorts from that because they just cleaned up the area in front of the net, and now here comes a shot from a distance that's through some traffic, and it beats Thomas Greiss, who had done a great job in relief at that point. To that point. So really good effort there on that play to keep it going, to not let that near miss get the better of them, and within seconds afterwards, they had the win. And it's a big one because now that they're back even in the series, they've announced their presence in a couple of ways in this one. And while the Islanders did an admirable job of erasing that deficit and really looked like they could have taken this game, the Flyers come away with a win, and a win is a win in the playoffs. And now you can move on to Game 3 and set your focus on that.
We'll get to the goaltender situation for the Islanders in just a couple of minutes, but I want to ask you before we get to that about the change that you guys talked about on the Sports Bash before the show, which was Haig in, Gostisbehere out, JVR in, Lawton out. So I want to ask you, what did you see from Haig and JVR today?
I thought Haig looked as good as he normally does in these situations. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's the best defenseman on the ice all the time. That's not typically the case. But there was just something about the way that Justin Braun plays alongside of him where there's more of a calmness because I think they understand each other's styles better or they know what to expect from each other. And Braun was more active on the offensive side as a result of that. It's definitely... It looks like a better fit for the Flyers. I think they just look better overall when Robert Haig's in the lineup, and it's not meant to be a knock on Shane Gostisbehere, but every time he seems to take that step forward with a good game, the next game doesn't replicate that success, and you make this change, and you bounce back from whatever happened and have a better showing. Then you get, in JVR's case, I liked his energy, all things considered. I thought he had a solid game. I don't think he did anything super spectacular, but I also don't see a reason why he should come back out of the lineup. I definitely think he provided some good energy, was pretty decent on the forecheck, all things considered, and you need guys to really put in the effort. So I think that having somebody like that who's fresh and who's sat out a few games could be a benefit. I'm curious to see what happens with tomorrow's lineup because I really would like to see and figure out more about whether or not Scott Lawton was a coach's choice for this departure from the lineup, or if there's something else going on beneath the surface here, and that he might be unfit to play in some capacity. But we'll find out more about that, I'm sure, in the coming hours. Alain Vigneault's talking about it, I'm sure. And not only that, but I think tomorrow, as the day builds up, we'll find out more as well about his status and whether or not that was just a decision to keep him out. And if it was just a coach's decision, I not only expect him to come back in, but I expect him to be very motivated, because they could use a guy like that for the two-way play in situations like the third period if you're protecting a lead. So I think that he's got a really good shot of getting back into the lineup for Game 3.
Before we touch on Game 3 tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on 97.3 ESPN, the coverage begins. I wanted to ask you one more thing about today's Flyers win. Flyers won, but they lost the face-off battle. I don't even remember the last time the Flyers didn't win the face-off battle. So, how did the Flyers end up being one of the best teams in the NHL throughout the year and throughout these resumption of play at face-offs? But today, the Islanders got the best of them. How'd that happen?
It can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes if you have your main face-off guy kicked out of a face-off and somebody else has to take the draw, then it gives you a clear disadvantage. The Flyers usually try to counter this by having two guys who know how to take face-offs on the same line. I don't know if there's a strategic play in that from the Islanders side where they see something on film or anything like that, because there's a lot of players study a lot of film nowadays. So maybe they see something that's a tendency. Maybe they're just doing something that helps them win the draw and get to it faster. I'm not really sure why they would lose the faceoff battle, but I do notice it happening a lot. And there were a handful of moments where you needed a faceoff win and you got it, and several others where you didn't get it. And sometimes that can be the difference between making a quick exit from your own zone when it's a defensive zone faceoff. Sometimes it can be the thing that helps to influence a successful offensive play and lead to a goal. So you definitely need to be better at faceoffs against this team than you were in this game today. And I don't think that that's lost on them. I think that they're a team that typically prides themselves on that percentage that they have. It's one of the tops in the league typically. So I think they'll come back tomorrow with a much better approach to faceoffs for sure. Speaking
of tomorrow, Game 3 tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm sure Kevin's going to have tons of coverage over about it at 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin Durso. Follow on Twitter at Kevin_Durso, our Flyers insider. So what are you looking for adjustment-wise from Vigneault? Because we know that win or lose, this guy is willing to make adjustments. And I have to think that after that third period, he's got to be looking around like, all right, how did we go from playing so great in the first period to having those lapses in judgment in the third?
Yeah, I think what he's going to have to do at this point, he doesn't have to do too much from a strategic standpoint. I think you started to find a formula that works to beat the Islanders, and realistically, even halfway through that third period, you were playing the shutdown style that you want to see that can help you win games. I mean, honestly, if they would have continued to do that throughout the third period like they had against a lot of other teams, they did it several times against Montreal, obviously, but they did it against all three of the other round-robin teams, then they could have come out of this on the other side with a 3-1 win and walked away comfortably and tied the series, and we'd be probably having a different conversation. But I think what you need to do, and I think it's an important thing that he said about this situation, is that he just mentioned in his press conference not too long ago, he doesn't remember, after the series against Montreal, he had told the team after the third period today that he doesn't remember coaching a series in the playoffs in his entire coaching career, which spans 17 years, where you have a playoff series where you didn't go to overtime at some point. So it does happen. These games are tight. And I think that what the message there was is it's about the will to win. You need to outwill other teams. And I think the Flyers were not the team that not only had the momentum, but they were the team that just wasn't carrying the better of the play. They were the team that didn't seem to want it as much as the Islanders did in that third period. And that's why it felt like the Islanders were going to take this game. And you saw the Flyers come out in overtime and look like they wanted it and find a way. And I think that goes a long way going into tomorrow, that the fact that it's a quick turnaround, I'm sure Barry Trotz is preparing his team in the same way, saying, maybe they let an opportunity get away in this game that they could be up 2-0. Now you're back tied in a series. You're going to play a game 5 on Monday next week. And you've got a shot now to have to come back really quickly, and you can erase that loss and have the same kind of bounce back game. Alain Vigneault's probably telling his team to run with this, to take that win, take the momentum from coming back from losing that lead, and build on it and take it to take this to the next level. Keep trying to take this to the next level. That's what they've kept talking about, is that there's another level to reach. And that first period looked like signs of that next level. Now they need to build on that even further, put it into a complete game, and perhaps that can give them a series lead if they show that in Game 3 tomorrow.
He's Kevin Durso. Again, follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Check out all of his Flyers coverage at 973ESPN.com. And he joined us on the Boardwalk on the hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, appreciate the analysis, and I'm sure we'll be basically keeping our fingers crossed for not another overtime game tomorrow night. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.